In this video, we're going to be setting ourselves up for our animations. So what I mean by that is currently, if I move this right hand, the left hand doesn't follow with it. So we're going to parent it to that. We're going to set up a crosshair somewhere down there that we can look through and act as our in-game crosshair. So we have a point to aim at. And I don't know what else yet. So for now, I'm going to only show the layers with our hands, and we're going to parent the left hand to the right hand. So to do that, click the left hand bone, go down here to bone constraints, do a child of, selecting our same skeleton, and we're going to do hand underscore R. Then we hit set inverse. So now when we move the weapon around with our right hand, the left hand follows. So that'll be useful for, well, it's pretty obvious. So now that that's done, we can go ahead and create our crosshair. So in object mode, I'm going to select the FPS arms because I want it to be in here. Under that collection, we're going to do Shift A, empty, plane axis. And I'm going to move this good ways out in front. Let's see, let's do -10, so it's 10 meters away. Just to have a point to aim at, and it's at our camera. Well, it's on the same height as our camera. So we're going to be, for example, when we do our poses, we're going to be bringing the weapon up. It's going to be roughly in line with this line here. So our camera, and we're going to have the iron sights pointed close as we can to the center. So we have that. Let's click on it. We can actually start work on our animation tab. So up here, if we click on animation, we're met with this page. Just going to drag the dope sheet down. On the left panel, I want to press 0 to go into the camera view. And as you can see, this little whatever isn't visible. So to make it visible, we go up here, click this little box to check it, do the drop down. Oh, it's called show overlays. We're going to select extras, and now you can see it. And from here, we're going to deselect bones, pretty much just everything else. So the only thing we have is our mesh and the crosshair, which is perfect. So now we can actually scale the crosshair down to about the size we think we would want. I'll go a little bigger. So look at it, like in full screen. I think that'll work just fine. I'm going to go ahead and rename it. Call this empty, change it to target crosshair. And I'll change the camera to FPS camera. Just have a little bit nicer naming. All right. So now I'd say we're pretty much ready to actually start with something simple like an idle animation. So I want to change the dope sheet to the action editor. Select the armature, pose mode, and we're going to begin. So if we click this little drop down box here, we can see we already have our pose library set up, but what we want is an actual action. So we're going to create a new action. I'm going to actually unlink it, do new, change this one to 1911, idle. And here's where we're going to start. So we need, let's see, I want to show our gizmos again. So I'm going to click this drop down box here, do move and rotate. I want to select local for the rotation. And we need to think about, I might just do something fairly simple. I don't know yet. As you can see, if we aim it up to the crosshair, we now kind of have a rough representation of aiming down the sights. That was just something I wanted to point out. So let's see here. I have the weapon pointing straight. We can angle it a little bit to the left. That was a lot. So I want to press R and then rotate on the Z axis. Just get it pointing a little bit closer to that. Trying to think about how I want it. Let's move a little bit farther left, closer to the center. Then rotate on the Z a smidge. And it's kind of starting to point. I can actually use this as a judgment as well to get it fairly close to the crosshair. So that's kind of pointing roughly at it, 10 meters out. Angle looks pretty nice. And I think we're going to start with this. And let's give you a little bit of an angle since we are just kind of resting. And point you up a bit. Let's see, rotate on the Y. Rotate it down just a touch. And we're actually pointing pretty close to the dead center of the crosshair in this initial idle pose too. So I think this is going to be the starting point for our pose, for our animation. I want to actually hide this camera real quick so we can go up here. And we can simply uncheck the view for the camera just so it's out of the way. So it's just one of those little annoyances when we're in certain views. Okay, and I guess we can go ahead and just insert a keyframe. So I'm going to actually select both the fingers. Actually, it shouldn't really matter, but I'm going to do this for the initial keyframe anyways. So starting at frame 1, I want to press A to select all the bones and insert via the I key and do location and rotation. And then I'm just simply going to unselect, actually, I want to copy these keyframes and drag them down to frame 251. So that way they're the same on the start and the end for our loop. And then I'm just going to uncheck our fingers because when we go to bake our animations, that's not going to be important. So now we have our right hand. So I want to go, let's see, we don't need this to be 250 frames long. Let's do something like, let's see, I want to do roughly something every 30 frames. So 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Let's do 150. And move these down to frame 151. Yeah. All right. One thing I almost forgot, we have to set ourselves up to be at 30 FPS. Well, we don't have to, but it'd be nicer. So if we go over here to the output properties, we'll see frame rate. Change this to 30 to correspond with Unreal Engine. All right, now let's begin making our halfway through pose. So let's see, what is half of 15? 7, 14, 7. Yeah, that's actually dead in the center already. So let's think about how we want this to move. So I'm thinking just something very subtle, like that ever so slight movement and tiny rotation and keyframe. Now let's look at it. Just a very gentle movement. And we're going to move these keys inward to 30. Then I'm going to copy our last keyframes and put it at 60 and play. So about like that. I'm going to change up frame 60 a bit. Let's rotate a little on the Z. Let's go down some. So that is rotation. See, I'm going to actually undo that bit of rotation. And I'm just going to go down a bit farther. Then on frame, let's see, 369, 90. I'm going to start moving up. All right, I'm trying to go very small movements here, making it difficult. Then I want to rotate on the Z, tiny bit like that. Insert a keyframe, and let's look. All right, 90. Let's go up a little more, 100. Or 110. All right, kind of liking it. I think it just needs to go just a smidge more vertically instead of out. So let's start just adjusting the keyframe slightly. Go a little left. Touch left. And let's look. All right, that's not bad. I'm going to extend a little farther. So 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. Let's go to frame 180. I want to move frames down. All right, let's see how we want to move this. And let's view it. It's not bad. I think I'm going to actually stick with it since this isn't an animating tutorial and I'm also not good at it. So we have our frame starting from 1 down to 180. And the reason we're having our very last keyframe set at frame 181 is for looping purposes. So this is a looping animation pretty much that's going to be continually running. So once we hit frame, 180, well, if this was the ending frame like this over here in 180, we're going to have two back-to-back frames that are the same. So it's going to be this frame, and then it's going to be playing our frame 1, which are both identical. And instead, we don't want that. We want it to blend. So this just allows us to kind of blend the start and the end together nicely. So we have our base idle animation, which is good. And we can go ahead and begin to start actually setting up our, well, we can export this out to Unreal Engine first. And so we can see what it looks like and give a general pose or a general socket location for the weapon. So to export this, we're going to click on the armature, File, Export, FBX. And what I'm going to do is I want to make a new preset. So I want to also make a new folder. Call this animations. Well, actually, I want to do those inside of the character. Yeah, I can just do them here. So this one's going to be a character animation. So let's call this one pistol idle. And we're going to change some settings. So we want selected objects. Go to geometry, make sure that's set to face. Go down to bake animation, check that. Uncheck all actions, uncheck NLA strips. Make sure under armature, add leaf bones is unselected and only deform bones is selected. And key all bones is selected. So now I want to click this little checkbox to make a new preset. Call it Unreal Engine Animation and press OK. So now it should be stored and we can export. And here's where I usually have that issue that I was talking about. So I'm going to go to Character, Animations. We have our pistol idle. Drag it in. For skeleton, we're going to select our FPS character selection or skeleton. Everything else we're going to leave the same and press import. Now let's look at it and I'll show you the issue, which might be hard to see because he's not holding anything. So as you can see, I don't know if you can see it very well, the animation's playing as intended, but the hands are kind of moving around inside of each other. I'm not going to fix this right now. I'm going to work on the skeleton or setting up that socket, and then that'll make it very easy for you to kind of see the problem. And if you have this problem, I'll show you one way around it. So we're going to go to this IK hand underscore R. We're going to add a socket. Now, if we go back into our Visual Studio project and I go to the character, we can see that the socket that the gun is added to is called grip point. That's what the gun, well, is attached to. So let's name the socket grip point and save. Now we can right click on grip point, add a preview asset, and do our pistol. And why in the world are you huge? All right, we're gonna have to scale down our socket a lot. You can see the size of it. So scale is gonna, let's do 0.1 and see. Wow, that was fast. And that's about the size we want for the socket. Let's start positioning it. All right, I want to pause you because you're making it hard to move. Let's just get a rough lineup. So we're not going to get it perfect right now. When we create our aim down sight animation, that's where we're going to really adjust the socket, because there we can really, it makes it a lot easier to line it up. All right, so let's look at Blender. View it from the front on frame 1, or yeah. So we have the cant. I'm going to view it from the front as well. We've got just a smidge more cant. Not quite that much. About like so. So that's pretty close. Let's look at the position. Piston needs to come up. Where the index finger's part way showing the magazine. It's going to come this way. Sticking out past it just a little bit. And up just a tad higher. I think that's pretty good. Let's go to perspective and look kind of from other aspects. I think that looks good. We're actually pretty close. So now I'm going to show you that issue. So if we watch both hands and where they intersect, and I play the animation, you can see I'm moving away from one another. There's like these slight little stutters, if so to speak. And this is the issue that I've been having for freaking ever. So the way we can go about resolving this is if we go to Blender, click on the armature again, File, Export, make sure our Unreal Engine animation thing's selected. We go down to where we see Simplify under Bake Animation. We change that to 0, and we export it. Then pop back in Unreal Engine, right-click on Pistol Idle, click Re-import Animation, and we play the animation. As you can see, they now move together as intended in Blender. So if we look in Blender and play, they stick together just like they do in Unreal Engine. So that is what we want. And now that we have, I don't know if the weapon needs to be tilted farther down or not. Scared, close enough. Now that we have our base pose and stuff set up, we can go ahead and just, actually I'm going to stop it here and we'll do the character next in the next video. So we now have our idle animation working inside of Unreal Engine with our weapon in our socket. So in the next one, we're going to set up our character blueprint, which is just going to be a duplicate / modified version of the first person character that's derived from our C++ class. That's really all it's going to be. And we're going to be setting up our animation blueprint to easily be able to test out our animations and see them. So I'll see you in that.